Hello everyone, this is a bit of a different video than what I usually make, but it's about a topic that I discuss a lot with current students and new grads, which is how to get into the gaming industry. Now, usually people have two main concerns. The first one being that they are in a degree which doesn't focus on gaming at all. That was the case for me. I was taking a bachelor in computer science and we didn't learn any C++ at all. So all of the C++ that I learned was through either tutorials or doing my own projects. So I started off following tutorials, got better and more confident about coding, and then I started making my own projects and improving from there. So my only advice really in this case is that you cannot depend on school to teach you whatever you need to know about the job market. You need to do your own projects outside of school, focusing on the field that you want to specialize in, because school is great to teach you algorithms, it's great to teach you the fundamentals of programming and math, but it's not that great at teaching you specifics about the field that you want to get into. So that's really all I have to say about that. And since you're watching this video, I assume that you are doing things outside of school, so you should be fine in that front. Now, the second point that people are concerned with is the focus of this video. And it's something that I struggled with as well when I was learning on my own, is asking the question, am I good enough to apply to these positions, or am I doing things the right way when I'm working on a project on my own? Now, it's very difficult to get answers to these questions if you're working on your own, because there's nobody there with a lot of experience to tell you what you're doing right or wrong. So you have to do a lot of trial and error and see what works and what doesn't work. But also, that shouldn't discourage you from trying things out. For example, I'm going to go over how I got my first internship. And I actually got it through a competition that Ubisoft Toronto ran. It was in 2017, and that ended up giving me an internship in the summer between my second and third year. And I will show you what my skill level was during that time. So the main outline of the competition is something like this. This outline is actually for 2020, but it's pretty similar to what we had in 2018. It's the same API and everything. And the idea is they give you an API, you can draw a single line, and using that line you need to make an asteroids game. They give us the API on Friday and we have to submit it on Sunday. So we have about 2.5 days to finish it and submit it to them to judge it. So a lot of people decided not to join this competition because they thought maybe there's somebody else that's going to be better that I'm going to lose to, and I'm not going to be able to get the internship through there, so I'm just going to try to apply for a normal internship instead. But the biggest issue with this is that, first, there is nothing to lose by entering the competition. You can enter the competition and also apply to the internship at the same time. And if you don't win the competition, you didn't lose anything, but you can also get some pretty good feedback about what you did right or wrong. For example, they did interview, I think, about 10 people from the 10 finalists, and then they picked the top 3 to give the internships to. But all of the 10 people that got interviews got pretty good feedback on what they did right and what they did wrong. So they gained out of it. They didn't lose anything. And this is what I always tell people, is that if there's nothing to lose, you might as well give it a try. Moving on to the API. So here's the API that they gave us. There was a way to draw a line, a way to print strings, play sound, and key presses, mouse position, and the controller. So simple input handling, sound, and rendering text and lines. And that's pretty much it. Let me show you the game quickly, how it looked and all of that. It was a pretty simple game. They asked for an asteroids game, and I just made an asteroids game, nothing else. And it was pretty much, you would fly around and you can shoot down the asteroids, and then if you hit an asteroid it would kill you. You get a score if you break asteroids, and so on. So it's pretty much a lot like the original asteroids game. And the code in here, you're going to notice that it's very familiar, because what I did was the framework that I wrote for this game is actually the same as the framework that I expanded on and made my SDL tutorials on. So for example, over here we have a game entity, and this game entity has a position, and I didn't even have vector 2, so I put in like X and Y positions. I didn't have a math library really. For example, I did start the math helper that we made in the framework, but it was very simple. It was just a way to rotate the point, clamp, magnitude of a vector or of an XY vector, normalize, and line intersection, which I used for the collision detection. So it was pretty simple. Back to the game entity, it was pretty much all it did was I could assign a parent, much like the framework that we did. It could rotate around, and what I did was I made everything out of lines. So I ended up making a line class, so it should be somewhere around here, line entity. And that line entity had an XY position, length, and rotation, but it also had, it also could take another line and a color to duplicate lines, and I'll explain that in a second. So that's pretty much it for the basics of what I did. And then I made an asteroid entity. An asteroid entity inherited from game entity. And then how the asteroids worked is that they were made entirely out of lines. And then to create an asteroid, all I did was, there we go. So it should be somewhere around here, generate shape. And to generate the shape of the asteroid, what I basically did was I started from the center of the asteroid. So let's say I started from the center. I put a point here, and then I rotated a random degree, and then put another point there, and then connected it with a line. Rotate a random degree, put another point here. Rotate in a random degree, and once I rotated up to 360 or less than 360, I would just connect the first and last point, and that gave me procedurally generated asteroids. So that was pretty simple, the way that it worked. And I also had the player entity, and the player entity just had pretty much just input handling and rendering and firing of the asteroid. So it wasn't too complicated. It was just moving left and right, or moving around in the direction of where you're looking, and then shooting a bullet whenever you press space. And then I think I had a bullet entity that was pretty much the same idea, but it was just, it would take a direction. So it has a direction here, and it would fly in that direction. So direction X and Y, that could have been a vector too, but you see the main idea here. And the most complicated part of the project was really just the collision detection. So for the collision detection I have here, it was pretty much just line intersection. So since everything in my game was made out of lines, I thought, well, maybe I can just detect whenever two lines intersect, and that would be it. In hindsight, I should have probably made like a broad phase collider with two circles, and that would detect if one object is inside the other. But I didn't really have enough time to do that, so I just went with line intersection, and it was pretty much set up in a way where, so if they're both vertical, ignore the collision. If one of them is vertical, then do this. If the other is vertical, do that. If neither of them is vertical, do y equals mx plus b. And the main reason why I split it into these two is because b is undefined in a vertical line. So I can't use my y equals mx plus b with a vertical line, and that's why I went with this route. Probably not the most elegant way to do it, but it worked. And that's pretty much it for most of the things that I did, to be honest. Like the debris, for example, it was just the broken bits. So for example, over here, when you destroy an asteroid, the broken pieces that show up we go. So the broken pieces that show up are the debris. And since the debris was a class, what I can do is I would spawn debris instead of the old entity that I spawned, and then the debris would just spread and it wouldn't have any collision or anything like that. So it's just a simple class that would take in a line. So a single debris is a line, and then it would give it a random direction and rotation, and it would then go on until a specified position, and then it would just disappear afterwards. And I think that's pretty much it. I had like a character entity that was just had different shapes for each character. So for example, that's what I had for press start. That's what it did, because the original Asteroids game didn't really have normal text. It had text like this one, so that's what I ended up going with. In hindsight, it was probably easier to just use the text, and it would have saved me a lot of time. But yeah, that's pretty much it for my submission. As you can see, it's not too complicated. The framework that I did afterwards was way more complicated, and I didn't need to know that much to actually get my internship and get a position during the summer. So the main purpose behind this video is to kind of show that if you're worried about not being good enough and you don't try, you will never be able to get to where you need to be. Because if you try and you fail, you will learn from it. And if you succeed, you gain everything that you need. So there is no point in not trying. And this is a big issue that I ran into, where a lot of people, especially in the degree that I was taking, where they didn't want to enter the competition because they said, I don't know C++, or I don't know enough about gaming to apply. Maybe somebody else that's better is going to join and beat me, which is not the best way of thinking about things, because once you decide that you're not good enough to do it, then you already failed. So hopefully that was helpful to some. Hopefully that would encourage more people to go for things. If there's a job, an entry job that you want to apply to, you should definitely try to apply to it. Whether you think that you are good enough or not to apply to it, you don't know if you are or not. The best way to do it is to apply and see what happens. If there is a competition, you should definitely try it. There is nothing to lose and everything to gain. Hopefully you learned something, and thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. I will not be making too many of these videos. They're very difficult to make. I've done so many takes, and I feel a lot more comfortable with programming. So we're gonna go back to that after this video.